Hello and welcome to the Dark Side of Perfect. I'm your host, Maggie, and if this is the first episode that you're ever clicking on, welcome. We are happy to have you, but click out of this and go listen to the ones before this because this episode marks the official end of season 1. I want to use this final episode of this season to sort of look back on the episodes that we have had in season 1 and summarize them into a couple of key themes that I noticed throughout them as I was recording them so that we can have it all in one place and then we can redefine perfect in season 1 before we move into season 2. And I also want to talk about what season 2 is going to look like. I want to give a life update and I want to give a metrics update of the podcast, which I won't do every season, but I think for season 1 especially, it is really important to celebrate our wins. So for season 1, I had a couple of goals, which I said in episode 1, and those goals were true of the entire podcast, of the whole Dark Side of Perfect. But we needed to start them in season 1. And those goals were to help expand your inner worldview. So, new hobbies, new ways of thinking and understanding yourselves with some whimsy. Goal number 2 was to help distinguish should versus wants. So, the external expectation versus internal wants, and make choices that feel aligned and not obligated. Goal number 3 was to redefine perfect and offer steps for authentic living. So, breaking out of the mold of society's expectation of you and helping provide the steps to live the way where you feel your best. In every episode, I tried to hit one of those goals, especially in season 1, because I thought it was really important that we follow the arc of, okay, we're in the mold. Okay, here's how we break out of the mold. And then, okay, here's what's next. We started the season defining perfect as a moving goalpost, blending external expectation and developed internal pressure, resulting in perfectionism, people pleasing, lack of boundaries, and falling into a should trap where we were unable to see what it is we really want. We spent the season exploring the results of perfect to realize that we were in the trap, then exploring emotional processing, and then the defense mechanisms like boundaries, and finally the physical home with our nervous system and coming into our body. Season 1 was about unlearning. We had to clear out the perfect girl mold to make space for self growth and build something new within ourselves. So, just as a quick summary, I'm going to go through each of the episodes, what we learned from each of the episodes, and how they all come together in one kind of idea. So, defining perfect. A high achiever, compassionate, responsible, self aware, who performs well, cares deeply, overthink constantly, and holds everything together for everyone. And we needed to understand ourselves to move forward. So, we talked about the should trap and how we were pushed into this mold, the different areas that it was coming from, and how the different expectations and language used around us influenced how we thought about ourselves and how we started, and how we thought about our relationship with other people and what we should be to them, which ended up being we should be everything to them. But where the real foundation of this season started was with grieving who you never got to be. After realizing that we were in the mold, we started with grief as the foundational identity work. We grieve the versions of ourselves that never got expressed, the parts that we suppressed to be acceptable, the softness, messiness, creativity, rebellion. We edited it out. But what we learned in this episode is that grief isn't weakness, it's awareness. And you can't become yourself without mourning what was lost. And suppressed identity doesn't disappear, it's just waiting for you to find it again. Then we talked about intentional energy placement with masculine and feminine energy and how those aren't gendered, they're just modes of operating. How masculine is about structure, logic, productivity, And feminine is about presence, creativity, emotion. And what we learned from that was that burnout often comes from overuse of one energy. And most perfect girls overdevelop that masculine energy hustle. But that feminine energy is not laziness, it's restoration. Then to build on that, we talked about romanticizing your inner life and how it's intentional attention and it's choosing to create an inner world that feels soft and safe. We talked about building energy, closing productivity loops, noticing your inner voice, mood awareness, slowing down. And what we learned was your inner world shapes your external experience. The way you speak to yourself matters more than productivity, and stillness is never wasted time. We use it to create transition rituals. Notice our natural rhythms of creative and actful versus restful moods. And we shifted from what should I be doing to what would feel aligned. Then we talked about perception and validation. Who am I without achievement? We talked about how perception quietly drives behavior and validation becomes your identity and achievement becomes proof of worth. But throughout that episode, we learned that people pleasing is safety seeking and approval is addictive and external validation feels good but is unstable. Without validation, many of us felt like nothing. So, in that episode, we learned how to cultivate some internal validation, which is so hard to cultivate, but we have to practice it before it becomes the norm. We have to pause before decisions and notice when we're performing versus participating. Then we talked about boundaries and how boundaries protect energy and how guilt doesn't always mean wrong and how you have to start small and reinforce those boundaries. We talked about how discomfort doesn't always equal danger and that a boundary only exists if it's maintained. And to set those boundaries, we have to start small, let the discomfort exist, and not collapse our limits to soothe others because we are the most important. And then we talked about our nervous system regulation and dropping into our body, hearing what our body is telling us. And what we learned from that episode is that we are full people and that we've been acting in our heads in this masculine energy for so long that we develop this apathy armor that is hard for us to take off. So we build these ice walls around ourselves to keep ourselves out. And we need to melt those walls to finally feel self love. Every episode in season one was about self trust, building identity, internal safety, and intentional living. The perfect girl that we were at the beginning of season one survived on performing, but the healed girl that we are becoming and that we are practicing every day lives by choosing. This season moved from external validation to internal grounding, performance to presence, over functioning to intentional energy, people pleasing to boundaries, and chaos to inner world cultivation. Moving forward, we learned that we can pause before decisions, notice our energy, romanticize small moments, set one small boundary, validate yourself internally, and let grief surface when it needs to. Because you don't need to reinvent yourself. You don't need to throw out your life in order to make a new one. You just need to gently return to yourself to figure out what it is that you want and to take the parts of your life that you love and keep them and take the parts of your life that you maybe feel like is just what you should be doing and reinvent them into something that looks more like the vision that you have that you keep just to yourself. The vision of what you want and not the vision of what we talked about, which is what you think you should be having. The perfect life of expectation of what you should be having. But how can you take the things out of that that you like and incorporate other things that maybe aren't a part of that image already? As we're talking about identity in season one, we recognize that you are not just productivity, you are not just perception, you are not just your usefulness, you are not just your compliance. You are evolving, complex, allowed to take up space, and allowed to exist imperfectly. You're becoming more honest with yourself. You're bringing back your identity, and you're realizing that you are a whole, full person. You're not just whatever you are to someone else. And that is what we learned in season one. This wasn't a season about becoming better. It was a season about becoming more honest with yourself and what you want and who you want to be and how to cultivate that softness and that intention within yourself. And I hope that you got that from season one and that it's not just me sitting here summarizing the episodes thinking that that's what it was. I hope that that came across. And if it didn't, please let me know and I can make more episodes on those themes. Before I move into my life update in season two, I do want to give a metrics update. I'm not obsessed with numbers by any means, even though I am a little bit, but I'm excited to continue building this community. And I think it's easy when you're breaking out of the mold of being a perfect girl to forget that there are other people experiencing it too and that you are not alone. Through the perfect girl journey, setting boundaries and figuring out what you want and maybe shedding the idea of some things can make you feel a little bit isolated because you're disappearing into yourself, doing your internal reflection, and maybe even realizing that some relationships that you're in aren't what are the best for you. So maybe you're adjusting some of your relationships and it's easy to feel isolated. But we are building this community together of perfect girls who are trying to break out of that mold, find intention, and find ourselves. And the first 2 months of a podcast, I have read a lot of articles about it, are the hardest. And we have done so well with our growth and our following and building this community. And you are not alone. There are a bunch of us with you. And the work that we have been doing to spread the word about this podcast, telling your friends, following, rating, interacting with the podcast has been so helpful and so encouraging to me to continue to make the podcast because I know that there are people out there who maybe haven't thought of things this way before and maybe they just need a little bit of support. And I'm happy and proud to be that support for you. So thank you so much for following the podcast, clicking on the episodes, listening to them, interacting with them. I really appreciate it. And I know that everyone else who is a part of this community appreciates it too. So, life update. In these episodes, I feel like I give a lot of personal anecdotes. So, you know a lot about my journey of being a perfect girl, but I never talk about what's going on with me right now. So, I just wanted to give a little bit of an update. In the context of the dark side of perfect, some growth wins I've had recently is I've really been trying to practice what I preach really consistently. So my work has been really busy, found myself being in some productivity loops occasionally, and I've been really trying to be intentional about those transition moments that we talked about in the routines episode and find those transition moments to close that productivity loop and step into my softness a little bit. I've been making time to do my creative endeavors and I've been making a lot of progress on them, which is amazing. And I have been trying to recognize when different tasks on my list require different kinds of energy so that I can bundle the energy in one and then transition to a different type of energy. And that has been really interesting for my day to day life. I've also been working, I want to do an episode on personal curriculum. So I have been working on my own personal curriculum, which I will not disclose yet, but I've been working on it so that I can use it as an example in the podcast. And it has been very fun and really interesting. So I'm really excited to make that episode in season two. I'm still practicing being, breaking out of the mold of being a perfect girl. Some days I'm a whimsical, nervous system regulated queen. Other days my head spins and I feel like I've lost control. And that's okay. Life isn't meant to be perfect, but I try and find the joy and meaning in every day. And sometimes that's all I can do. All I can do is go on a walk and have no music in my ears and look at the trees and try and feel grateful for what I have and what I'm doing. And if that's all I can do that day while I'm stuck in the hustle, then, that's something. As a regular life update, my husband and I are looking for a house to move into. So that's very exciting. I could be moving very soon. We want to stay in Colorado. We're just not sure where yet. We're still looking, but it's a very exciting time and I'm learning a lot about the home buying process. So if you want an episode on the home buying process, I'm happy to make one. I could even bring in my realtor as a guest and we could talk about the home buying process together because it's something that they don't teach us ever. In fact, if you have any ideas of episodes that you're like, I've never heard anything about that, let's talk about it. Let me know because I'm happy to support your journey in any way, even if it's not technically like directly related to being a perfect girl. But I want to make episodes that explore every part of your journey. So that's my life update. And as I'm talking about episodes I want to make, let's talk about season 2. So season 1 was the foundation for the internal work, and season 2 will move into applied life. So in season 2, I want to have guests on, both professional and perfectionists, and we will continue to explore season 1 themes, but I want to expand on them, like I was just talking about, to talk about perfect girl molds in the context of dating, health, career, creativity, and I want to support you on your path whatever way that I can. So if we want to talk about something that isn't directly related to the perfect girl mold, if we want to talk about home buying or finances or, I don't know, adult things or even just like ideological things, I want to make an episode on that. I want to help support you on your path whatever way I can. I have a ton of episode ideas, but this is a community, like I was saying before. It's not just about me sitting here behind the mic. What do you want to hear about? Anything from life to path to anything in between. I want to support you. So DM me, comment on this episode, any of your thoughts. If you have any episode ideas, I'd be happy to incorporate them in the future. Since season 2 is going to have guests on it, I do want to clarify that I do really like this solo podcast format where I'm just talking to the mic and to myself, basically. So not every episode moving forward will have a guest, but I do want to support the podcast with guests. And I think that they have a lot of alternative viewpoints that they can bring in that will be really helpful for all of our journeys as perfect girls, especially on the things that I don't know a ton about. So it's going to be a little bit of a blend between guests and solo. So a little bit of a mixed format. And as for video podcasts, I haven't decided if I want to do that yet. I don't have a script for these episodes. I outline them and I write down any science background or anything that I need to reference. And I have that in front of me, but I don't script them. And so having a video podcast is a little bit of a different ballgame than what I'm doing right now. And I'm not sure how I could keep my current format so that I can have this improv that I have with a video podcast. So I need to think about it a little bit more. And that is my podcast updates. So let's close out season 1, 13 episodes, with redefining perfect. So at the start of this season, perfect was a cage, an ice wall, a mold that we were shoved into. But I want to leave you with a new definition that we have created through these 13 episodes. Perfect isn't a finish line, it's alignment. It's when your outside life matches your internal drive. And that internal drive is not cultivated by external expectation, but through the emotional work that we have been doing by grieving who you never got to be, recognizing the what if paths, and figuring out what fills your cup and what makes you happy without the perception and validation of others. Thank you so much for trusting me to support you on this journey. Listening to these episodes, your support has meant the world to me, and I appreciate all of your interaction, following, rating, commenting, following the Instagram. It all really does help to get the word out there, get the podcast onto people's recommended on Spotify and Apple instead of just being word of mouth. But I really appreciate you also telling your friends, letting other people who you think might relate to this podcast know about it, getting the word out there. If you are not already following the podcast, please do so. Feel free to rate, comment. Any interaction really does help. If you're on Instagram and you would like to follow the podcast Instagram, it is darksideofperfect.pod. That is darksideofperfect, POD. Go be soft, go be messy, and find joy wherever you are today. And I will see you in season 2.